In the unforgiving winter of 1875, Selene Colinthar and her two young children were barely eking out a living on their deteriorating homestead in Montana. One blustery night, an unexpected visitor arrived at their doorstep, a stranger on the brink of death. This stranger was a well-dressed cowboy, his body riddled with what appeared to be gunshot wounds, blood pouring from his injuries. Though they had scarcely enough food to sustain themselves, Selene couldn't ignore someone in desperate need. She pulled him inside, treated his wounds with valuable herbs from her garden, and offered him their final bowl of stew. Unbeknownst to this struggling widow, her compassionate act would alter not only the stranger's fate, but also the course of her family's future. What hidden secret did this injured cowboy harbor that would bring about such profound changes for the impoverished woman who had rescued him? Selene Colinthar knelt before the worn family Bible, her shaking fingers tracing the familiar entries, birth records, wedding dates, and now her husband's death certificate, the ink still fresh from just 4 months prior. The leather binding was frayed and worn, much like everything else on their struggling homestead. She carefully closed the Bible and placed it back in the cedar chest that Peregrine had crafted during their first year of marriage. Through the cabin's single window, she watched Arya and Gareth playing outside, their laughter a poignant reminder of how swiftly childhood innocence could be overshadowed by adversity. At just 10 years old, Arya was already burdened with responsibilities far beyond her years, while 8-year-old Gareth strove to fill his father's shoes. The morning breeze whistled through the gaps in the cabin walls that Peregrine would have sealed had pneumonia not claimed him so abruptly the previous winter. Selene wrapped her shawl more tightly around herself, recalling how he had promised to teach Gareth about maintaining the homestead come spring. Now that spring had arrived, it brought with it more challenges than she could manage alone. Their once thriving herd of cattle had dwindled to 3 milk cows and a frail calf. The barn roof hung precariously, threatening to cave in with the next heavy snowfall. The wheat field, once their source of pride, lay half-planted. She simply lacked the strength to tend to it all by herself. Selene had sold Peregrine's tools, then his horse, and finally her mother's silver tea set, but the money had only covered their most urgent needs. Mr. Jenkins from the bank had paid her a visit the previous day, his sympathy barely concealing his professional demeanor. 3 months, Mrs. Colinthar, he had said, shuffling papers with practiced indifference. The bank has been lenient, given the circumstances, but we can't extend the mortgage any further. Selene began heating water for the morning's porridge, stretching as she did. The last of their oats with dried apple slices. Arya entered, carrying fresh eggs from their remaining hens. "Just 3 today, Milas," she informed, her youthful face bearing a weight beyond her years. "But they're good ones." "That's wonderful, dear," Selene managed to reply, though her heart ached. 3 eggs wouldn't satisfy 3 hungry stomachs. But Arya deserved encouragement for her efforts. "Could you call Gareth? Breakfast is almost ready." As Arya went to summon her brother, Selene portioned the porridge into 3 bowls, ensuring the children received more than she did. She had grown accustomed to suppressing her own hunger. A mother's sacrifice was as instinctive as breathing. Gareth entered triumphantly, bearing a bundle of kindling he had collected. "Mama, look. I found some dry wood beneath the old oak tree." His eyes sparkled with the same resolve Peregrine had always exhibited, filling Selene with both pride and sorrow. "Excellent, my brave boy." She tousled his hair as he passed, noticing how his sleeves had become too short. They would need new clothes before winter, but that was a concern for another time. During breakfast, Arya declared, Mrs. Ironson from church mentioned she'd pay me to assist with her mending. She stirred her porridge thoughtfully. I could go after completing my chores. Selene's throat constricted. Her children shouldn't have to labor for others at such tender ages, but pride had no place in survival. That's very kind of her, Arya. Just don't overlook your studies. Education is one thing Selene refused to compromise. Peregrine had been so insistent about their children learning to read and calculate. After breakfast, Selene observed her children making their way to the modest schoolhouse a mile down the road. Their mended clothes and worn boots spoke of their hardship, but they held their heads high, just as she had taught them. Colinthar's children stood tall, regardless of their circumstances. Alone in the quiet cabin, Selene permitted herself a fleeting moment of vulnerability. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she grasped the edge of the worn table. "Oh, Peregrine," she whispered to the vacant room. "How am I supposed to manage this without you?" The question lingered unanswered, as it had every day since his departure. But she had no alternative but to find a solution. 3 months to save their home, 3 months to work a miracle. Selene dried her eyes, smoothed her apron, and stepped outside to confront another day of daunting decisions and unyielding toil. Her children relied on her strength, and strong she would remain, even if it shattered her heart in the process. The tempest arrived just before nightfall, bringing a piercing wind that shook the cabin shutters. Selene had just finished storing the day's scant harvest, 3 turnips and a few winter squash, when she heard Gareth's urgent cries from outside. "Mama, Mama, hurry." There was a note of urgency in his voice she had never heard before. Selene grabbed her shawl, rushing out into the encroaching darkness. The wind lashed her skirts as she followed Gareth's voice toward the outskirts of their wheat field. Arya was already present, standing as still as a statue, her gaze fixed on something lurking in the deepening shadows. "Dear heavens," Selene murmured, making the sign of the cross. Before them a man lay motionless in the mud, his elegant shirt soaked with blood. Next to him, a stunning black stallion was lifeless, its saddle decorated with intricate Mexican silver spurs that barely shimmered in the dwindling light. The man's attire hinted at his affluence, a high-quality wool coat and leather boots worth more than their entire year's harvest. However, riches held no power when life's essence was draining into the Montana earth. "He's still alive, Malus," Arya whispered, her face pale in the encroaching darkness. "We can't abandon him here." Selene felt the burden of the decision heavy on her shoulders. They had barely enough provisions for themselves, barely enough medicine, barely enough of anything. But her daughter was correct. They couldn't leave him to perish. "Gareth, hurry back and revive the fire. Arya, assist me with him." Selene knelt in the mud, feeling for the man's pulse. It was faint, fluttering weakly beneath his skin like a caged bird. The stranger let out a low groan as they rolled him over. He was a large man, his muscles evident even through his fine clothing. Blood matted his dark hair, and more flowed from a wound in his side. His face, though contorted with pain, bore the distinguished features of someone accustomed to authority. "What do you think happened to him?" Arya asked, straining to help her mother drag the unconscious man toward their cabin. "Nothing fortunate," Selene replied sternly, observing the powder burns around the bullet hole in his shirt. "This was no hunting mishap?" They managed to get him inside, though Selene's back protested with every step. Gareth had the fire roaring, casting anxious glances at the blood they were trailing across the floor. "Arya, retrieve my herb box. Gareth, bring clean cloths and water." Selene's voice was calm, though her hands trembled as she began cutting away the stranger's shirt. The wound was severe, but the bullet had exited cleanly. She had seen worse during the war when their farm had served as a makeshift field hospital. As she cleaned and dressed the wound, Selene couldn't help but notice other scars on the man's body. Old bullet wounds, knife marks, the stories of a turbulent life etched into his flesh. What kind of man was she inviting into her home, near her children? But then she spotted something else, a silver pocket watch, blood-stained but elegant, hanging from his vest. She carefully opened it, revealing an inscription, "To J.W. with eternal love." Arundel, the watch's owner, had once been loved, had been someone's beloved. She couldn't turn him away. Throughout the night, they cared for him. Arya proved to be indispensable, changing cold compresses and helping prepare poultices from Selene's dwindling herb supply. Gareth kept the fire burning and stood watch at the window, though Selene wasn't sure she wanted to know what he was watching for. The stranger's fever rose with the moon, bringing with it incoherent ramblings. I, Arundel, should have been present. His voice, though hoarse from the fever, held a refined quality. The documents in the saddlebag needed to remain hidden for now. Selene comforted him, applying a damp cloth to his brow. "You are safe with us." The first light of dawn was just beginning to show when his fever finally subsided. Selene had sent the children to bed, their young faces etched with concern and fatigue. She remained by the stranger's side, observing the steady rhythm of his breathing and the firm contours of his face. Who was he? What circumstances had led him, injured and solitary, to the outskirts of their struggling farm? These questions swirled in her weary mind as she kept her watch. As the initial rays of sunlight began to filter through the window, the stranger's eyes flickered open. They were a vivid blue, clear and perceptive, despite the lingering effects of the fever. For a long moment he gazed at Selene, his confusion slowly giving way to comprehension. "You saved my life," he stated simply, his voice gravelly yet tender. Selene nodded, suddenly conscious of her disarrayed state and the evident poverty surrounding them. Rest now. "Your questions can wait." He grasped her hand as she stood, his hold stronger than expected. "Thank you," he murmured, his voice heavy with sincerity, before his eyes closed once more, this time in peaceful slumber. Selene watched him a moment longer, an unfamiliar sensation stirring within her. Somehow she knew that their lives would be forever altered by this encounter. The following 2 days passed in a haze of delirious murmurs and anxious care. Selene sent the children to school as usual, reluctant to disrupt their daily routine, but she could see that their thoughts were back at the cabin with their enigmatic visitor. Even at school, Arya later recounted, they couldn't escape the fascination. Gareth had discovered a crumpled wanted poster near the schoolhouse, depicting rough-looking men who had been plaguing nearby ranches. "Those are probably the same men who shot him," Malus whispered over dinner, his eyes wide with excitement. "Perhaps he is a lawman tracking them down." "Or perhaps," Arya mused, stirring her meager soup, "he is fleeing from them." Selene hushed them both, though the same questions had been plaguing her. The stranger's fine attire suggested affluence, but the scars on his body hinted at a violent past. His fevered ramblings only deepened the mystery. "The double H must be protected," he would mutter, tossing fitfully. Other times, he would call out for Arundel, the name from the pocket watch, his voice thick with sorrow. Then there were the unsettling moments when he would suddenly stiffen, hands clutching as if reaching for weapons, speaking of ambushes and betrayal. During his more coherent moments, he was invariably polite, expressing his gratitude for each small kindness with the manners of a gentleman. He had even attempted to decline their precious broth, noticing how little they had. "Ma'am, I cannot take food from your children's mouths." "Nonsense," Selene had replied firmly, though her heart warmed at his thoughtfulness. A body requires vigor to mend. On the third day, as Selene changed his dressings, she observed that his fever had finally subsided entirely. His blue eyes were lucid, tracking her every move, and his face held a healthy hue beyond the pallor of sickness. "Your children," he remarked abruptly, his voice more robust than before. "They are well-mannered. You've raised them admirably." Selene's hands paused for a moment. "Thank you. They are good kids. They've had to mature quickly, though." He nodded, comprehension in his eyes as he surveyed their modest cabin. "Times are tough," he acknowledged. "We cope," Selene replied, perhaps too hastily. Pride compelled her to add, "We don't seek handouts, sir." She let the inquiry linger. A faint smile graced his lips. "Hartson? Corvus Hartson?" He hesitated, choosing his next words with care. "And I would never assume to offer charity, Mrs. Colinthar, but I believe in settling my debts." There was something in his tone that made Selene look up abruptly. He met her gaze steadily, and she had the disconcerting sensation that he had noticed every worn spot in their clothes, every fissure in the walls, every indication of their dire situation. Before she could reply, Arya burst in, breathless. "Mama, a rider's coming." Alarm laced her voice, and Selene's heart constricted. Corvus Hartson's response was swift. The invalid vanished, replaced by a man of action, despite his injuries. "Get the children behind the root cellar door," he instructed softly, already attempting to stand. "If anyone asks, you haven't seen a soul." Selene assisted him to the back room, questions swirling in her mind. Who were these men? Why was he so convinced they posed a threat? But there was no time. Horses were approaching. She hurried Arya and Gareth into the root cellar, pressing a finger to her lips. Then she straightened her apron, took a steadying breath, and opened the cabin door just as 3 riders arrived. They were rugged men, dust from the trail coating their clothes, weapons prominently displayed on their hips. The leader, a scarred man with icy eyes, tipped his hat in a mocking gesture of politeness. "Afternoon, ma'am. We're searching for a friend of ours, a tall man, well-dressed, who might have passed through here recently." Selene held his gaze steadily, drawing on every ounce of Peregrine's fortitude. "Haven't seen anyone matching that description. We don't have many visitors out here." The man's eyes narrowed, scrutinizing her face for signs of deceit. Behind him, his companions were assessing the property with predatory interest. "Mind if we take a look around, just to be thorough?" "I do mind," Selene retorted, her voice firm. "My children are inside, and I don't permit strangers near them. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have chores to attend to." She stood her ground, heart racing, until they finally turned their horses away. Only when they were mere specks on the horizon did she close the door and lean against it, shaking. What manner of man was she sheltering? And what had she entangled her family in? That night, once the children had drifted off to sleep, Selene approached Corvus, carrying a steaming cup of willow bark tea and a mind full of questions that demanded answers. He was propped up in the makeshift bed on the floor, his appearance more familiar, despite the signs of his ongoing recovery. "Those individuals, Selene started, her voice barely above a whisper. They weren't acquaintances of yours, were they? No, Mother. Corvus accepted the tea with a nod of gratitude. And I appreciate that you didn't reveal my presence, even though I'm sure it was difficult to deceive them like that. Selene took a seat in Peregrine's old chair, her fingers idly tracing the smooth, worn wood of the armrests. What I shared with them wasn't a complete falsehood. I encountered a wounded man in need of assistance, not the friend they were seeking. A faint smile graced Corvus's lips. You have a talent for diplomacy, Mrs. Colinthar. He leaned over and retrieved a folded document from his coat. I think it's time you learned the truth about who you've been sheltering. The paper he handed her was a deed for the Double H Ranch, one of the most extensive properties in the territory. Selene's eyes widened as she read the name. Corvus Peregrine Hartson. You are the owner of the Double H. She had heard of the ranch, of course. Everyone had. Its owner was rumored to be wealthy but elusive, a mystery to most people in the territory. I am. Corvus set down his tea, his expression turning grave. Those men who visited today, they are employed by Caelan Nightgrove, though not openly. He has been attempting to acquire the Double H for years, by whatever means necessary. His hand instinctively moved to his healing wound. This was his most recent attempt at persuasion. Selene's thoughts raced, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. The fine clothing, the quality of his horse, his bearing. It all made sense now. But one thing still puzzled her. Why are you sharing this with me? Because you and your children put yourselves in danger to aid a stranger. Corvus held her gaze steadily. You deserve to know the truth, and to understand the risk you undertook. More importantly, you deserve to know that I have the means to shield you from any repercussions of your kindness. Selene sat up straighter in her chair, her pride evident. We didn't assist you expecting anything in return, Mr. Hartson. Corvus, please. His voice softened. And I know you didn't. That's exactly why I want to help. At that moment, Gareth appeared in the doorway, his hair tousled from sleep, and clutching his father's old wooden horse. Malice? I thought I heard voices. Selene began to stand to guide him back to bed, but Corvus spoke first. Come here, young man. Gareth approached hesitantly, his curiosity overcoming his timidity. Corvus reached into his coat once more and pulled out a small carved horse, its details so intricate that every muscle and flowing mane was visible. I've been working on this while I've been resting, Corvus explained, handing it to Gareth. It kept me from going stir-crazy. What do you think? Gareth's eyes sparkled as he examined the carving. It looks just like your horse, sir. The one that his voice trailed off, recalling the fallen stallion. Yes, it does. Corvus's voice held no resentment, only gentle understanding. His name was Midnight. He was a loyal companion. He demonstrated to Gareth how the wooden horse's legs were hinged, enabling it to be positioned in various ways. Every fine horse deserves a dedicated owner to tend to it. Gareth solemnly agreed, hugging both wooden horses tightly to his chest. Selene felt tears welling up, recalling how Peregrine used to spend evenings crafting toys for the children. Thank you, Sir Corvus, Gareth said, his face lighting up. I'll take excellent care of it. After Selene had tucked Gareth back into bed, she returned to find Corvus deep in thought. He's a wonderful boy, he remarked. He reminds me of myself at that age. He paused, a shadow of pain crossing his face. Before what? Before I discovered that the world isn't always gentle with dreamers. Corvus shifted uncomfortably, a slight wince on his face. Your children still have that spark in their eyes, Mrs. Colinthar. Despite everything, they haven't lost their hope. That speaks volumes about your resilience. Selene felt a blush rising to her cheeks. Selene, please, if I am to address you by your first name. Selene. He smiled, and for a moment she saw beyond the successful rancher to the man underneath, one who had experienced loss, understood hardship, and valued simple acts of kindness. I believe that tomorrow I might be well enough to teach Gareth the art of whittling, if you agree, of course. She found herself smiling in return. I think he would enjoy that immensely. Neither of them acknowledged the deed still lying between them, or the possibility of the men's return, or the growing sense that their lives were shifting in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. For now, it was enough to share this peaceful moment, warmed by the growing embers of trust between them. As Corvus regained his strength over the following days, Selene observed him watching her family, with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. He spent mornings instructing Gareth in whittling, afternoons listening to Arya recite from her school books, and evenings sharing tales of cattle drives and frontier life that captivated both children. But it was the quiet moments that revealed the most about their enigmatic guest. One afternoon, while the children were at school, Selene found him standing by the window, holding a faded photograph she hadn't seen before. In it, a lovely young woman smiled at the camera, her hand resting on a younger Corvus's shoulder. "Arundel," he murmured softly without turning around. "My wife." Selene hesitated in her mending, sensing the profound sadness in those two words. The woman from the pocket watch inscription. He nodded, finally turning to face her. "She passed away 8 years ago. Fever claimed her and our unborn child." His fingers traced the photograph's edge. "I built the double H for her, you know. She always dreamed of a place where we could raise a family, grow old together." By the time it was completed, she was gone. The revelations settled in the quiet cabin like dust motes in sunlight. Selene finally grasped why the affluent owner of the double H lived in solitude, why his gaze sometimes held such darkness. Peregrine, my late husband, constructed this cabin himself, Selene revealed, sharing her sorrow in response. She explained that every nail he drove was a pledge of our shared future. Corvus eased into the chair opposite her, his injury permitting more mobility. "So, how did you two cross paths?" Selene's face lit up with a fond recollection. "It was at a barn raising. He was the sole individual who didn't regard me as some fragile blossom. Being the preacher's daughter, I was often seen that way. The first words out of his mouth were, 'Those hands look like they've known honest labor.' What a perceptive man he was." Selene continued her mending, the rhythmic motion calming her. "The children bear his likeness in so many ways. Arya possesses his resolve, and Gareth, his tender heart. They're truly remarkable," Corvus concurred, observing her. "The way they've risen to support their mother, never uttering a word of complaint about the loads they bear, reminds me that strength manifests in countless ways." Selene's hands paused. "Occasionally, I fear it's too heavy a burden for them. They ought to be at play, not—" She gestured around their worn surroundings. "They do play," Corvus assured her gently. "I've seen them, but they also comprehend what's truly important. Family, loyalty, diligence. Those are lessons many adults never grasp." Their gazes locked across the cabin, and Selene sensed a shift between them, an acknowledgement of mutual understanding, of parallel sorrows that had molded them both. The moment was disrupted by the children's return from school, their voices echoing through the yard. Arya rushed in first, clutching a sheet of paper. "Corvus, my teacher said my arithmetic was flawless today." "Is that so?" Corvus's entire demeanor transformed, warming like sunlight piercing through clouds. "Well, that merits a proper celebration. What if I teach you to calculate cattle percentages? Every rancher needs to know their figures." As Arya took her place beside him at the table, Gareth lingering nearby to listen, Selene watched them together. Corvus interacted with the children with an effortless grace that hinted at the father he might have been. Had circumstances been different, there was no patronization in his approach, no insincere flattery, only genuine curiosity and tender guidance. Later that night, after the children had retired, Selene found Corvus on the porch, gazing at the stars. His injury was healing nicely, which meant his departure was imminent. The realization brought an unwelcome pang to her heart. "I've been isolated at the Double H for so long," he began without preamble. "I'd forgotten the feeling of having a family nearby." He turned to face her, his expression open and unguarded in the moonlight. "Thank you for reminding me." Selene wanted to express something about solitude, about healing, about how his presence had rekindled a vital spark in their home, but the words eluded her. Instead, she simply nodded, comprehension flowing between them in the still night air. They remained side by side in a peaceful quiet. As a coyote's distant howl reached out to its partner, a solitary cry that resonated across the plains and touched their souls. The day Corvus Hartson announced his readiness to depart brought a mix of relief and unanticipated sorrow to the Colinthar family. The previous day he had borrowed a neighbor's horse, sending Gareth to make the arrangements, and now he stood in their kitchen, appearing more like a prosperous rancher than the injured man they had cared for. "Before I go," he began, placing a substantial envelope on the table, "there's a matter we should address." Selene glanced at the envelope with caution, her posture tensing. "We've managed well enough on our own, Mr. Hartson." "Corvus," he corrected softly. "Indeed, you have managed, but at what expense?" He pulled out a chair, inviting her to sit. "Please let me explain." Selene complied, observing how Arya and Gareth lingered in the doorway, their expressions a blend of curiosity and worry. Corvus acknowledged them as well, offering a warm smile. "Children, could you give your mother and me a few moments alone?" His request was polite yet firm. They withdrew reluctantly, though Selene suspected they would be listening from just outside. Corvus took a seat across from her, pushing the envelope closer. "This is a bank document. I've paid off your mortgage." Selene's hand instinctively went to her throat. "You overstepped." "Perhaps," he conceded, raising a hand to stop her objection. "But I had the ability and the desire." "The bank won't be able to take your home anymore." Tears welled up in Selene's eyes, relief battling with pride. "We can't accept this." "You can, and you will." Corvus's voice was steady but resolute. "Not as a handout, Selene. As an investment in people who showed remarkable kindness to a stranger." He leaned in, his eyes earnest. "But that's not my only proposal." From his coat, he retrieved another document. "The Double H needs reliable, honest people. I'm offering you a kind of partnership." Selene's hands shook as she accepted the paper. It was a contract, meticulously written, outlining a managerial role in a new breeding operation he intended to establish on her land. "Your property is on prime grazing land," Corvus explained. "With some enhancements, a new barn, proper fencing, quality livestock, it could be productive again. The children could continue their education, but also learn ranching if they wish. He paused, gauging her reaction. You'd receive a fair salary, plus a share of the operation's profits. Selene looked at the contract, her thoughts racing. Why would you do this? Because in the week I've been here, I've seen more authentic strength and dignity than I've encountered in years of business. Corvus's voice gentled. Your children are intelligent and diligent. You're capable and resolute. The Double H would gain from having people like you involved. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a small key. There's a strong box in my saddlebag. Could you send Gareth to retrieve it? When Gareth returned with the box, Corvus handled it with care as he opened it. Bundles of cash and extra documents were tucked inside. This is an advance on your earnings, sufficient to cover the urgent repairs the estate demands. He pointed to the documents. These are endorsements from acquaintances in the village, the general store, the mercantile, the lumber yard. They'll provide you with credit on my behalf for any materials you need. Selene's pride clashed with her need for practicality. The proposal was incredibly kind. It was transformative. But taking assistance, especially on such a grand scale, I won't be indebted to any man, she declared at last, her voice steady. Corvus smiled gently. I wouldn't anticipate that. This is a business arrangement, Selene. Straightforward and uncomplicated. You'll earn everything you gain. He motioned towards the agreement. Examine it thoroughly. Consult a lawyer if you desire. I'll respect whatever choice you make. Arya's voice echoed from the entrance, unable to hold back any longer. Does this mean we can repair the barn? Corvus turned, his face softening. If your mother consents, then yes. And perhaps we can acquire a few horses for you and Gareth to practice with. Gareth joined his sister, eyes wide with wonder. Our own horses, Gareth? Selene hesitated, but Corvus raised a hand. Allow them to hope a little, Selene. His gaze met hers. Often, dreams are what empower us to accept aid when pride might otherwise prevent us. Selene looked at her children's eager faces. Then she glanced back at the documents in front of her, thinking of Peregrine, of his aspirations for their family, and of how he had always said that opportunity often came in unexpected forms. I'll need some time to consider this, she said finally. Corvus nodded, rising from his seat. Naturally. I'll return in 3 days. He headed towards the door, then stopped. Keep in mind, Selene, accepting help doesn't mean giving up your independence. Sometimes it means choosing an alternative route to the same goal. After he left, Selene sat at the table for a long time, the contract before her, listening to her children's excited murmurs and feeling the burden of potential pressing against her chest like a tangible force. The architect's blueprints for the homestead's renovation were spread out across Selene's kitchen table, blue lines outlining a future she was still learning to envision. 3 weeks had passed since she had signed Corvus's contract, and already the property was undergoing a metamorphosis. The new barn took shape swiftly, its newly cut wood filling the spring air with a fresh scent. Local men, hearing that Corvus Hartson of the Double H was supporting the endeavor, had shown up offering their help. Selene observed them from her doorway, recalling past barn raisings, when Peregrine had been alive and their future had seemed so assured. It has good bones, Corvus remarked, coming to stand beside her. He had been visiting every few days to supervise the work, though Selene suspected he had other motives for his frequent appearances. This entire town, much like the house, simply needed someone to recognize its hidden value. Rumors circulated when news of their arrangement reached the townsfolk. Selene overheard the murmurs in church and noticed the curious looks cast her way. Some, like Mrs. Ironson, greeted her with sincere kindness, delighted to see the Colinthar family's luck changing. Others, such as the banker's wife, observed her with thinly veiled disapproval, assuming the worst about the widow and the wealthy rancher. "Let them chatter," Corvus had responded when she brought it up. "Those who have never faced hardship are quick to criticize those who have." His words hinted at a personal history of such judgments. Arya and Gareth seemed unaware of the gossip, too thrilled by each new change. The arrival of the first two horses, gentle and well-trained animals Corvus had selected just for them, brought tears to their eyes. Now they spent every spare moment at the corral, learning to ride under Corvus's patient guidance. "Keep your back straight, Gareth," he called out, watching the boy guide his horse in careful circles. "That's it. You're a natural, son." The words slipped out effortlessly, and Selene saw Gareth sit a little taller in the saddle. Corvus hadn't seemed to notice his slip, but Selene felt its significance. He had been filling voids in their lives they hadn't even known existed. "The foundation for the new wing will begin tomorrow," Corvus announced, reviewing the plans once more. "The children should each have their own room." Selene followed the blue lines with her finger. "It seems like so much, Corvus." "Not when compared to what you've given me," he replied softly, his voice serious. When she looked up questioning, he explained, "It's a reminder of what truly matters. Why I built the Double H in the first place. It was never meant to be just about making a profit or causing a stir." From the corral, a shout interrupted them. Arya had managed her first proper trot, her face beaming with pride. "Mama, did you see?" "Brilliant, darling," Selene called back, her heart swelling. She hadn't heard such joy in her daughter's voice since before Peregrine's passing. Corvus smiled at Arya's accomplishment, then turned back to Selene. "There's something else I've been wanting to talk about. The school board had a meeting yesterday." Selene stiffened, recalling the time she'd had to plead for leniency when she couldn't afford the children's school supplies. "I've arranged for a proper library to be built," Corvus continued, "and for a second teacher to be hired. The children in this district deserve every chance to learn." "The whole district?" Selene asked, surprised. "Not just Arya and Gareth." Corvus shook his head. "Education benefits everyone." "Selene, your children remind me of that every evening when I see them with their books." She studied his profile, this man who had entered their lives like a figure from one of Arya's stories. "Why are you really doing all this, Corvus?" He remained silent for a while, observing Gareth and Arya with their horses. "When Arundel passed away, I overlooked something crucial," he eventually admitted. "I overlooked that wealth without a goal is merely a burden in your pockets. You and your family have reminded me of the value of creating something significant." A call from the barn interrupted their conversation. The workers had completed the installation of the main beam. Before long, there would be a stable for the horses, a space for hay storage, and a proper tack room. The architectural drawings depicted it all, with every detail meticulously planned. "Progress," Corvus murmured softly, his voice filled with contentment. "But this is merely the start," Selene remarked, noticing a hint in his tone that implied he had more in mind than just the construction. Before she could inquire further, Arya summoned him to watch her trot once more. He walked away, leaving Selene to ponder the transformations occurring, not just to their land, but to their hearts. Arya's first riding saddle arrived on a Tuesday morning. the tooled leather shimmering with intricate patterns of morning glories and wild roses. She stood in awe, tracing her fingers over the detailed craftsmanship, as Corvus explained the artistry involved in its creation. "Every skilled horsewoman needs her own saddle," he said, demonstrating how to maintain the leather. "This one is tailored just for you." The design, he paused, a fleeting emotion crossing his eyes. The morning glories were Arundel's favorite, and it seemed appropriate, somehow. Selene, watching from the barn doorway, recognized the deeper meaning behind the gift. He wasn't merely giving Arya a saddle. He was sharing a piece of his past, intertwining fragments of his lost dreams with their new journey. "It's beautiful," Arya whispered, then unexpectedly embraced Corvus. He hesitated for a moment before wrapping his arms around her, his expression a blend of joy and old sorrow. "Well, now," he said gruffly, clearing his throat. "Let's mount that mare of yours." The lessons that followed weren't solely about riding. Corvus instructed Arya and Gareth on the correct way to approach a horse, how to interpret its mood, and how to gain its trust. Selene found herself learning as well, observing the patient manner in which he built their confidence. "Horses are similar to people," he explained one afternoon as Gareth struggled to get his mount to comply. "They sense when you're anxious or uncertain. You must believe in yourself before they will believe in you." Gareth scowled, gripping the reins too tightly. "But what if I make a mistake?" "Then you learn from it." Corvus gently adjusted the boy's hands. "That's all any of us can do. Your father, he would have taught you these things, wouldn't he?" Gareth nodded, his eyes glistening with tears. "He promised to teach me everything about the farm when I grew older." "He'd be proud of you now," Corvus said softly. "Learning new skills, assisting your mother, and being brave even when it's challenging." He stepped back, gesturing to the horse. "Now, show me that turn again." Selene observed her son stand taller, his resolve replacing his earlier hesitation. The horse reacted instantly to his more confident commands, performing a flawless maneuver. "That's my boy," Corvus exclaimed, his pride clear in his tone. He noticed Selena watching them, and a silent exchange occurred between them, a mutual recognition of the significance of these moments. As Selene cooked dinner later that night, she overheard Corvus and Arya on the porch, their voices drifting in through the open window. Arya was inquiring about the Double H, asking about the cattle operations and breeding programs. "I want to absorb every detail," Arya asserted. "Mama says girls can achieve anything if they put their minds to it." "Your mama is a wise woman," Corvus responded. "You know, some of the finest ranch managers I've encountered are women. They possess an innate ability with the animals and a keen eye for detail that many men overlook. Could I become a ranch manager one day?" "With dedication and learning, absolutely," Corvus assured her, his voice filled with genuine encouragement. "Here's what I'll do. Tomorrow, I'll show you how we maintain the breeding records. Mathematics, genealogy, careful observation, it all plays a crucial role in building a robust herd." Selene stirred the stew, recalling Peregrine's words about Arya. "That girl has more passion in her than most grown men," he had said. He would have been thrilled to see her like this, her eyes sparkling with purpose, her mind hungry for knowledge. The screen door creaked as Gareth joined his sister and Corvus on the porch. Soon, they were engrossed in a discussion about various horse breeds, the boy's natural curiosity drawing out Corvus's vast knowledge. Selene listened to their voices melding in the twilight, her children's eager questions, Corvus's thoughtful responses, the shared laughter. This, she realized, was what healing sounded like. Not the absence of sorrow, but the presence of newfound joy coexisting with treasured memories. Corvus met her gaze through the window, and his smile held a warmth that made her heart flutter. He had given them more than just financial stability. He had restored their sense of possibility, their right to dream beyond mere existence. "Malus," Gareth called out. "Corvus says I can assist with the new calves when they arrive. Real ranch work." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," she replied, her voice steady despite the emotion welling up in her throat. "Now, go wash up for dinner, both of you." As the children hurried inside, Corvus remained on the porch, his expression thoughtful. "They're eager learners," he remarked when she joined him. "Like their mother," Selene replied, feeling her cheeks warm. "We've had an excellent teacher." His hand found hers in the deepening darkness, a brief touch that felt as instinctive as breathing. "We're all learning together, Selene. That's what family does." The word family lingered between them, laden with questions and promises. The summer gradually gave way to autumn, transforming the Montana sky into hues of rich gold and deep blue. Corvus spread out a hand-drawn map on the kitchen table, illustrating to Selene the growth of their humble homestead. Fresh fencing now enclosed the enlarged pastures. The restored barn stood tall and strong, and the wheat field, Peregrine's beloved project, had produced its most bountiful harvest in recent memory. "The earth here is remarkably fertile," Corvus pointed out, his fingertip outlining their property's borders. "With thoughtful crop rotation and the new irrigation setup, you'll witness even greater harvests come next season." Selene examined the map, astonished by the transformation of their land. "I never imagined this place would flourish again." "You always had the potential for success." Corvus's tone was gentle. It merely needed some encouragement to flourish. The Harvest Festival was drawing near, and for the first time since Peregrine's passing, Selene felt prepared to fully engage. The Colinthar family had always taken part in the past, but this year would be unique. Their root cellar was brimming, their pantry well-stocked, and Arya had even earned a ribbon at the county fair for her equestrian skills. Mrs. Ironson inquired if we'd host the quilting circle next week, Selene shared, adjusting her apron. She mentioned that our new parlor addition would be ideal for it. Corvus's smile held a deeper understanding. The quilting circle was more than just a sewing gathering. It was the core of the community's social fabric, where reputations could be shaped or repaired. Their invitations signaled a change in how the town perceived their altered situation. "You ought to agree," he suggested. "Those women will see what I've known all along. A family that endures with dignity." The rhythm of approaching hoofbeats caught their attention. Arya and Gareth came into view, their horses moving in perfect harmony as they inspected the fence line. Corvus had trained them to ride as a unit, emphasizing that ranch work demanded trust in your partner as much as skill with your horse. "They seem natural in the saddle," Selene whispered, observing her children through the window. They were. It was dormant within them, awaiting the perfect time to awaken. Corvus moved closer, his presence steady and comforting beside her. Like other things that lie dormant until the right moment, Selene felt a warmth in her cheeks, conscious of his proximity. These moments had been occurring more often, quiet talks that held deeper significance, brief touches that lasted just a touch too long. The town's whispers had shifted from scandal to wondering when, not if, the prosperous rancher would reveal his intentions. But Corvus never hurried, never assumed. He was nurturing this bond as meticulously as he'd aided them in restoring the farm, placing each brick of trust with a careful intent. The children rushed in, bringing the cool autumn breeze with them. Corvus, Gareth corrected himself, blushing. We spotted 2 breaks in the north fence, but we marked them exactly as you taught us. The mistake wasn't overlooked. Corvus's gaze briefly locked with Selene's before he addressed Gareth. Well done, son. Can you show me on the map where you discovered them? As Gareth enthusiastically indicated the spots, Arya approached Selene near the stove. Mama, Mrs. Davidson at the general store mentioned they need assistance with their bookkeeping. She recalled how skilled I am with numbers, thanks to Corvus teaching me the breeding records. Do you think we should consider it? Selene agreed, impressed by her daughter's proactive nature. The thought of Arya working in town had once concerned her, but with their stable life and Corvus's steadfast presence, it now seemed appropriate for Arya to explore new opportunities. Later, after the children had retired for the night, Corvus hesitated by the door. The Harvest Festival, he began. I was hoping, that is, if you'd permit me to accompany you and the children. Selene felt a smile forming on her lips, charmed by the usually confident rancher's nervousness. We would be delighted, she responded softly. His smile in return was radiant. Then I'll wish you good night, Mrs. Colinthar, he said, tipping his hat in a manner that was both respectful and intimate. As she watched him ride away into the twilight, Selene traced the window frame that Peregrine had crafted years ago. The A-wood was smooth beneath her touch, sturdy and reliable, much like the foundation of their new life. She reflected that love could build enduring things, and sometimes it returned in new forms when one was ready to welcome it. The storm arrived abruptly, sweeping across the prairie with a ferocity that seemed divine. Selene stood by the window, observing as lightning tore the afternoon sky into sharp fragments. The air felt unsettling, too dense, too charged, and the wind carried an unfamiliar sound, a deep moaning that unsettled the horses, causing them to paw anxiously in their stalls. Milas! Arya exclaimed, rushing in from the storm, her hair disheveled by the wind. Corvus is riding in from the Double H. He says a twister is coming. As if her words had summoned him, Corvus's horse emerged from the rain, its hooves kicking up mud. He urged it swiftly toward the house, dismounting before it had fully halted, his expression grave. Storm cellar, immediately, he commanded, his voice cutting through the wind's roar. Gareth, assist me in getting the horses into the barn. Arya, gather the emergency supplies your mother prepared. Selene, I won't stay in the cellar while you and Gareth are outside. She interrupted him, already moving to help Arya. A flash of lightning revealed his face, a mix of concern and admiration. Headstrong woman, he murmured, but the words held affection. Very well, but hurry. They moved as a cohesive unit, their practiced emergency routine, combined with Corvus's composed leadership, ensuring every moment was used efficiently as they guided the frightened horses into the barn. Selene noticed the lightning-damaged beam that would pose their challenge. Gareth saw it too. Corvus, observe this. He gestured towards the primary beam where lightning had scorched and fractured the timber. The entire framework creaked menacingly in the gusting wind. Leave immediately. Corvus urged them towards the exit, but it was already too late. With a noise akin to gunfire, the beam started to shatter. What transpired next appeared to happen in slow motion. Corvus thrust Gareth out of harm's way, but the shifting beam struck his own shoulder, forcing him to his knees. Selene cried out his name, struggling against the wind to reach him. The rope! He panted, indicating the wall. "Selene, you understand the procedure?" She did indeed. They had rehearsed emergency repairs. Corvus had insisted that they all learn fundamental barn maintenance. Gareth and Arya reinforced the support beams just as they had practiced. The children acted without hesitation, seizing the reinforcement poles they had stored for such emergencies. Selene's hands deftly manipulated the rope, constructing the pulley system Corvus had instructed her in. Together they labored to stabilize the failing beam. The family operated in unison, like a finely tuned mechanism. "Never imagine," Corvus grunted, as he assisted in positioning the support despite his injured shoulder, "that I'd be so thankful for those practice sessions." "Less conversation, more bracing," Selene commanded, but she noticed his proud smile through the rain cascading down their faces. The storm raged outside, but within the barn, 4 individuals worked in flawless harmony. Arya, who had learned knots from Corvus during their riding lessons, secured the temporary braces. Gareth, recalling everything his father had taught him about wood and the additional engineering knowledge from Corvus, helped determine the support angles. Once the final brace was secured, they stepped back, breathing heavily, watching the reinforced beam withstand the wind's onslaught. The barn groaned and trembled, but it endured. Corvus led them swiftly to the house, cradling his injured arm. "The twister is approaching." They reached the storm cellar just as the tornado touched down, its roar muffling all other noises. In the lamplight below ground, Selene assessed Corvus's shoulder, while the children huddled together, listening to the turmoil above. "It's not dislocated," she declared with relief, her touch gentle on his skin. "But you'll have quite the bruises." "Worth it," he murmured, his uninjured hand covering hers where it rested on his shoulder. "Selene, witnessing you all collaborate like that. We had an excellent instructor." She met his gaze in the faint light. "You've provided us with more than just shelter, Corvus. You've equipped us with the means to safeguard ourselves." Arya's voice echoed from where she sat with Gareth. "We're not frightened, Mama. Well, not as much as we used to be. Corvus taught us that being ready is better than being scared, and that family looks out for each other," Gareth affirmed resolutely. Corvus's breath hitched at the boy's words, and Selene felt his hand squeeze hers. The tempest above gradually dissipated, its wrath expended across the vast expanse of the prairie. They remained in the cellar until the danger had passed, speaking in hushed tones, finding solace in each other's company. When they finally climbed out, the barn stood resolute, battered but unyielding, much like the family that had battled to preserve it. The beam marred by lightning would serve as a testament to this night, a reminder of how adversity had revealed their true mettle. A family united by more than lineage or fate, tempered by trials and fortified by love. While assisting Corvus with his bandages after the storm, Selene stumbled upon his journal by chance. It tumbled from his coat pocket, bound in leather and worn with use, revealing pages filled with meticulous architectural script. She attempted to avert her gaze, but a familiar name seized her attention. Arundel would have been enchanted by the Colinthar children. "It's all right," Corvus murmured, noticing her fine. "Peruse it if you wish. There should be no secrets between us." He hesitated, allowing the implicit word to linger between them. Selene took a seat beside him, the journal warm in her grasp, his words unveiling a depth of spirit she had not anticipated, pages brimming with both sorrow and hope. He penned Arendel's passing, his solitary years wandering the double H, and how an act of kindness from a struggling widow and her offspring had stirred something he had believed lost forever. "I've resumed writing since encountering your family," he confessed, observing her as she read. Arundel always insisted I kept my emotions too guarded, that I needed to set them free on paper. She seems wise, Selene remarked tenderly, turning a page to discover a sketch of Arya astride a horse, Gareth honing his new tools, and herself framed in the doorway of their home. She would have cherished you all. Corvus's voice was heavy with feeling. Sometimes I believe she guided me here. That fateful night I was shot, her way of urging me to cease hiding from life. Selene closed the journal with care. Share with me about her, the genuine Arundel, not merely the remembrance. Corvus smiled, reclining in his chair. She adored morning glories, hence Arya's saddle design. She said they reminded her that beauty blooms anew each day. He chuckled softly. She was abysmal at cooking, but refused to acknowledge it. Charred everything except coffee, but she could captivate anyone, from ranch hands to bankers. How did you two meet? At a charitable auction in Denver. I was there to acquire breeding stock. She was orchestrating the event, striving to raise funds for an orphanage. His gaze drifted with remembrance. She persuaded me to donate triple what I had intended. She argued that if I had the means to purchase fine cattle, I had the means to aid orphans. Selene smiled, envisioning the scene. She challenged you, much like someone else. I know. His uninjured hand found hers. Selene, these past months, watching you advocate for your children, witnessing your fortitude and elegance. I never imagined I'd feel this way again. Corvus, allow me to conclude, please. He gently squeezed her hand. I'm not aiming to take Peregrine's place, just as you're not stepping into Arendel's shoes. However, I believe they would both be pleased to see us finding our path to each other. Selene's eyes welled up with tears. The children are deeply fond of you, and I cherish them as if they were my own. He turned to face her directly. I have come to love their mother as well, in a way that is both astonishing and deeply humbling. Selene's heart pounded in her chest. They had been inching towards this moment for months, but hearing the words spoken aloud made it tangible, undeniable. I've been frightened, she confessed. Not of loving you, but of relying on someone again, of risking another loss. I understand, Corvus replied, his thumb gently tracing circles on her palm. We've both learned that love involves risking pain, but it also means choosing happiness, choosing to live. He motioned towards his journal. I've been chronicling our story, Selene. Not just mine, but all of ours. How fate or destiny brought us together. How your family showed me how to live again. Selene reflected on Peregrine, on his aspirations for their children, his hopes for their future. She thought of Arundel, who had encouraged Corvus to express his heart on paper. Their loves hadn't vanished with their passing. They had evolved, becoming the bedrock for something new. Share with me what you've written, she requested softly. Corvus opened the journal once more, locating a recent entry. His voice was tender as he read about Arya's first triumphant cattle drive, Gareth's burgeoning talent in woodwork, and how Selene's laughter had begun to sound unburdened again. He wrote of healing, of second chances, of love that flourished not despite past sorrow, but because of it, because loss had taught them the value of joy. As his words filled the silent room, Selene felt the final barriers around her heart dissolving. They were creating something beautiful here, not just on paper or on the land, but in the spaces between their hearts, in the way their fractured pieces came together to form something complete and new. The first snow arrived early that year, covering the Colinthar homestead in a spotless white blanket. Selene watched from her bedroom window as Corvus taught the children how to interpret weather signs in the morning sky. Their breath misted the air as he pointed out cloud patterns, explaining how to foresee storms from nature's subtle cues. This winter felt distinct from the last, not merely because of their well-repaired barn and sturdy roof, but because of the warmth that permeated their home, despite the chill outside. Evidence of that warmth was evident throughout the house. Handcrafted Christmas presents, carefully concealed in dresser drawers, secret exchanges between Arya and Gareth as they plotted surprises. The quiet satisfaction in Corvus's eyes when he thought no one was observing. The Bramson family lost their cabin in that fire last week, Arya mentioned during dinner, pushing her stew around thoughtfully. Nisara Bramson said they're sheltering in the church basement until spring. Corvus laid down his spoon, locking eyes with Selene across the table. They had previously talked about hosting the Bramsons, but had paused to consider the children's opinions. The basement is dreadfully cold, Gareth pointed out, and they have young children. Selene beamed with pride at her children's compassionate hearts. How do you both feel about sharing your rooms temporarily? The Bramsons could stay in our new addition while they rebuild. We'd need to relocate the Christmas tree, Arya considered. But it would fit nicely in the front parlor, and I could assist Mr. Bramson with the rebuilding, Gareth suggested. Corvus has been instructing me about house frames. Corvus cleared his throat, visibly touched by their swift agreement. Very well, then. I'll visit them tomorrow to extend the invitation. Later that night, after the Bramsons had been invited and welcomed, Selene found Corvus in the barn working on something he swiftly covered with a cloth. No sneaking a peek, he cautioned, smiling. It's a Christmas secret. She leaned against the doorway, observing him work by lamplight. You've initiated quite the tradition, you know. The children are resolute. Their handcrafted gifts must be flawless. Speaking of which, he retrieved a small package wrapped in brown paper. This one can't wait until Christmas. Inside was a stunning leather-bound book filled with blank pages, its cover adorned with morning glories like Arya's saddle. I thought, Corvus said gently, you might wish to write your own story. And the children's as well. Memory is a treasure, Selene. It deserves to be safeguarded. Selene traced her fingers over the soft leather, recalling Corvus's journal, and how he'd used writing as a means of healing. Thank you, she murmured. A disturbance from the house interrupted them, the Bramsons arriving with their modest belongings. Selene and Corvus rushed to assist, watching as their children warmly welcomed the younger Bramson kids. That night, with two families huddled under one roof, Selene penned the first entry in her new journal. Today, we discovered that home expands to accommodate what love demands. The children surrendered their rooms without a second thought, intuitively grasping the concept. What Corvus and I have come to understand, that blessings grow when shared. The days grew shorter, but their evenings grew more vibrant. Corvus taught both families his mother's old Christmas carols, while they crafted decorations from pine cones and ribbon. The Bramson children contributed their own customs, paper snowflakes, Swedish prayers, and tales of their grandmother's homeland. Arya and Nisara Bramson became inseparable, spending hours together, creating gifts for their families. Gareth took young Billy Bramson under his wing, teaching him about tools and wood, with the same patience Corvus had shown him. The aroma of Christmas baking permeated the house. Selene and Mrs. Bramson exchanged recipes, blending traditions as effortlessly as they mixed dough. Even Mr. Bramson's quiet melancholy began to dissipate as Corvus included him in planning the rebuild of their cabin, providing him with hope to sustain him through the winter. One night, Selene noticed Corvus standing in the entrance of the bustling parlor, observing their growing family with tears in his eyes. "Are you reconsidering your decision to take them in?" she inquired gently. He shook his head, his thoughts drifting to Arundel, but in a new light. He faced Selene, holding her hand. She had always maintained that wealth should be shared, that a home should reflect the size of one's heart. He smiled softly. She would have cherished this lively scene. Peregrine, too, Selene agreed. He had always believed in the power of neighbors supporting each other. Corvus drew her closer, both of them watching as Arya patiently taught the youngest Bramson girl how to string cranberries. "We're not just keeping their memories alive anymore, are we?" he murmured. "We're creating something new, something that belongs to all of us." Selene rested against his strength, feeling the truth in his words. This Christmas, with its homemade presents and shared responsibilities, its blended customs and expanded family, was teaching them all what love could achieve when allowed to flourish. A chilling letter arrived on a crisp January morning, delivered by a ranch hand from the Double H, who had ridden swiftly through the snow. Selene recognized Kaelin Nightgrove's elegant handwriting even before Corvus's expression darkened at the sight of it. "The children?" Corvus asked quietly, scanning the contents. "Are they safe at school?" Selene replied, moving to read over his shoulder. The words sent a shiver down her spine. "Hartson, your recent family arrangements have not gone unnoticed. It's quite heartwarming how you found yourself a ready-made family. It would be a pity if anything happened to them. The Double H could have been acquired peacefully. Now, well, even the sturdiest barn can be set ablaze. Consider this a final warning." Corvus crumpled the paper, his knuckles turning white. "I should have anticipated that he wouldn't let this go. Nightgrove has never been one to accept defeat gracefully." "Tell me everything this time," Selene said, placing a hand on his arm. Corvus slumped into a chair, suddenly looking exhausted. "Kaelin Nightgrove and I were business partners years ago. He helped fund the Double H's early days when banks were unwilling to invest in a young rancher's dreams. But his vision differed from mine. How? He wanted to build an empire, drive out smaller ranches, control the entire territory. I aimed to create something sustainable, something that would benefit the community." Corvus's jaw clenched. "When I bought him out, he didn't take it well. He started acquiring land around the Double H, trying to cut us off from the water rights and grazing lands. The night you were shot, his men," Corvus confirmed, "they had been pressuring other ranchers to sell. I had gathered evidence and was taking it to the territorial authorities. They tried to stop me." His eyes met Selene's. "I never intended to bring this danger to your home." Selene stood tall, feeling Peregrine's strength within her. "Our home," she corrected firmly. "We face challenges together now." "Selene, no," he began, but she interrupted him. "You've given us back our future. Corvus had assisted us in creating something truly beautiful here, and we were determined not to let fear take that away." A horse's whinny shattered the tense atmosphere. Through the window we spotted Gareth and Arya returning from school earlier than usual, with the sheriff by their side. "Corvus Hartson," Sheriff Grindstone called out as they drew nearer. "We received reports of strange men lurking around the school. We thought it best to bring your children home safely." Corvus's expression grew stern as he helped Arya dismount from her horse. "Did you get a look at any of them?" he asked. "No, sir," Arya replied, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. "But their horses resembled the ones those men rode last summer when they came searching for you." Gareth stood close to Corvus, unconsciously mirroring his protective posture. I had noticed them too, hiding behind the mercantile, observing us as we shopped with Malus yesterday. Selene felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the cold winter air. They had been watched, their movements studied, and their routines observed. James must have sensed it as well, for he turned to the sheriff with a resolute expression. "John, I believe it's time we delve into the specifics of Blackwood's activities. I have documents you should examine, along with the evidence you were carrying that night." The sheriff's hand rested deliberately on his gun belt. Corvus nodded in agreement. "And more that I've collected since Selene's property deed, the threats to other ranchers, details of his coercive tactics." He glanced at the family. "But first, we must fortify the homestead." The following hours were a whirlwind of activity. Corvus and the sheriff organized armed patrols consisting of trusted men. Selene and the children brought the horses into the barn, secured the windows, and prepared emergency supplies, just as they had done before the storm. "We've prepared for this too, Gareth," Arya reminded him as they filled the water barrels. "Remember what Corvus taught us. Being ready is better than being scared." Selene overheard their conversation and felt a surge of fierce pride. Her children had grown so much, learning not just ranching skills from Corvus, but also courage and clear thinking in the face of danger. That evening, after the sheriff had left with Corvus's evidence and extra patrols were in place, the family huddled together in the parlor. The Bramsons had insisted on staying despite the threat, Mr. Bramson declaring firmly that neighbors stand together in times of trouble. Corvus held Selene's hand tightly as they discussed plans for the coming days. Though fear lingered in the air like wood smoke, no one spoke of it. Instead, they focused on practical matters, guard rotation, supply checks, and signals between houses. "Whatever comes our way," Corvus said finally, looking at each beloved face in turn, "we face it as a family." In that moment, watching her children's brave faces in the firelight, Selene knew they would endure. Love had forged this family, and fear would not tear it apart. The assault came 3 nights later, during the darkest hour before dawn. Selene awoke to the scent of smoke and Corvus's urgent voice. "They've set the far pasture ablaze. They aim to lure us out." The family moved with practiced efficiency. There was no panic, no wasted effort. Arya and Gareth assisted the Bramson children into the storm cellar, while their parents joined the effort to pass buckets. Corvus's injury from the storm had barely healed, but he worked tirelessly, directing the men and coordinating their defense. "They're approaching from the north ridge." Sheriff Grindstone's voice cut through the chaos. "At least 8 riders." Selene's heart tightened as she watched Corvus check his gun, his face set in stern lines. "Stay with the children," he instructed her. But she grasped his arm. "Your wound. I'll be fine." He kissed her swiftly, intensely. "Keep them safe." But as he turned to leave, Arya's voice called out from behind them. "Riders are approaching from the south, too, through the winter wheat." Corvus spun around, realizing they were being surrounded. Selene saw the moment his tactical mind shifted, assessing their situation. They had prepared for an attack, but not from 2 directions. The barn, he decided. Everyone inside. It's the sturdiest building we have. They hurried to comply, guiding children and adults alike into the fortified structure. Corvus's enhancements had made it as solid as a fortress, with clear lines of sight and defensive positions. As Selena helped Mrs. Bramson with the youngest children, she heard Corvus and the sheriff organizing their defense. "Gareth," Corvus called, "remember where we stored the extra ammunition?" "Yes, sir. Behind the loose board in the tack room." "Good lad. Arya, your mother's rifle is already loaded," Corvus said. Arya appeared with Selene's Winchester, her young face determined. "And I remember what you taught me about loading it." Selene felt a surge of pride mixed with fear. Her children were scared, yes, but they were their father's children, and now Corvus's too. They knew what needed to be done. The first shots came as a warning, pinging off the barn's metal roof. "They want to frighten us out," Corvus explained, positioning defenders at strategic points. "Nightgrove prefers to avoid outright murder. Bad for business." "Then what do they want?" Mr. Bramson asked, holding his youngest. "A display of force to prove we're defenseless, without double-edged protection." Corvus's voice hardened. "But we're not defenseless." As if to emphasize his point, Arya called out, "Milas, they're moving the fire closer to the house." Selene met Corvus's eyes across the barn. Their home, everything they'd built together, stood vulnerable. But before either could speak, Gareth stepped forward. "Gareth?" "The irrigation system," he said firmly. "The one Corvus designed. We can flood the North Field from here." Corvus's face lit with fierce pride. "The control lever is right there in the barn wall. Selene, your boy's a genius." "Our boy," she corrected softly, watching Gareth and Corvus work the irrigation controls together. Water began gushing across the North Field, creating a barrier between the fire and the house, but their success was brief. A bullet shattered the barn door, and instantly the night exploded with gunshots. "Keep down," Corvus commanded, retreating to fire back through a defensive opening. However, as he pivoted, Selene noticed him falter, his old injury reopening under the stress. "Corvus," she hurried to his side, applying pressure to the spreading bloodstain on his shirt. "It's merely a scratch," he attempted to reassure her, but his face was drained of color from the pain. "Papa's injured," Gareth exclaimed, overcome by his fear. The word lingered in the air for a moment, even amidst the turmoil. Corvus's eyes welled up with tears that had nothing to do with his physical pain. "I'm fine, son," he rasped. "We all will be." As if in response to his words, a new sound pierced the night. "Horses approaching at a full gallop. Numerous of them," Sheriff Grindstone reported, after a quick glance through the window. "It's the double hands," he shouted. "There must be 20 of them coming in from the east." The ranch hands' arrival shifted the balance of the fight. Trapped between the law and the loyal double hands, the Blackwood forces swiftly retreated. As the gunfire subsided, Selene assisted Corvus to his feet, steadying him as they exited the barn. Their home remained standing thanks to Gareth's swift thinking. The fire was under control, and the arriving ranch hands were already helping to extinguish it entirely. But it was the sight inside the barn that moved Selene the most. Their two families were huddled together, her children demonstrating to the younger ones how to be brave. Everyone was supporting each other through the ordeal. Corvus leaned heavily on her, observing the same scene. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for bringing this peril." "Enough," Selena turned to face him. "You heard Gareth? You're his papa now. Our children chose you, Corvus Hartson, and so did I. Whatever lies ahead, we confront it together." The first light of dawn was cresting over the mountains, casting the snow-covered landscape in hues of pink and gold. Their world had transformed in the night, but they had emerged stronger, their bonds forged by fire and fear, and found unbreakable. In the peaceful days that followed the attack, healing manifested in various ways. Corvus's physical wound healed gradually, under Selene's attentive care, but it was the deeper healing within the family that proved most significant. The children were the first to address the unspoken topic. Arya and Gareth stood in the doorway of Corvus's recovery room, concealing something behind their backs. "Papa," Arya said softly, trying out the word that Gareth had cried out in fear. "We made you something." Corvus's breath hitched at the title, his eyes meeting Selene's where she sat beside his bed. She nodded encouragingly, her heart swelling. The children presented a handcrafted wooden box, its lid adorned with morning glories, much like those on Arya's saddle. Inside lay a ring, a simple gold band that Selene recognized with a jolt. "It was Dad's," Gareth explained, his voice quiet but resolute. "We found it in Melis's cedar chest. We thought maybe it was time it served a new purpose." Corvus straightened his posture, his emotions plainly visible. "Children, I couldn't possibly accept this." Arya interjected. "Dad would have wanted you to have it. He always said that love was about safeguarding family. That's what you've done. What you continue to do." Selene moved to sit beside Corvus on the bed, gently taking his hand. "They're right," she murmured. "Peregrine would be proud of the man who has helped raise his children, who has instilled in them strength, courage, and love." Corvus gazed at the ring, then at the faces of his family, for they were truly his family now, united by choice, love, and shared experiences. "I would be deeply honored," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "But only if your mother consents to make it official." He turned to Selene, his eyes filled with intent. "I should be down on one knee for this, but you're precisely where you belong," Selene responded, tears welling up. "Surrounded by our children in our home, asking a question we've all known the answer to for months." Gareth eagerly bounced on his toes. "So you'll marry him, Mama?" "Yes," Selene laughed, wiping her eyes. "Yes, I'll marry him." Arya delicately placed Peregrine's ring in Corvus's open palm. As he slid it onto Selene's finger, she felt the weight of the past and present merging, not erasing old love, but constructing something new from its foundation. Later that evening, as the children shared the news with the Bramsons, who had insisted on staying until Corvus had fully recovered, Selene found herself alone with her fiancé. "I've been contemplating something," Corvus said, his voice thoughtful, "about names and legacies." "Oh, the double H. It was named for Hartson, but perhaps it's time for a change. The circle C, perhaps for Colinthar." Selene gently touched his face. "The children carry the Colinthar name with pride. But maybe we need something new, something that represents all of us." Corvus captured her hand, kissing her palm. "What do you have in mind?" "The Morning Glory Ranch," she suggested. "For Arundel's flowers, for new beginnings, for beauty that blooms anew each day." His eyes grew misty. "I should have known you'd find the perfect way to honor both our past while building our future." He shifted carefully, mindful of his healing wound. "I've been working on something else as well." I had planned to wait, but he reached for his journal, opening it to a marked page. Inside lay adoption papers already prepared, awaiting only signatures. "If the children wish," he said softly. "They'll always be Colinthar by blood, but they could be Hartsons too. A fresh start for all of us." Selene read through tears as Corvus explained his plan. How the children could choose to keep Colinthar as a middle name, honoring their father while adding Hartson to mark their new chapter. How he'd already discussed it with the town lawyer, ensuring everything would be legal and proper. We'll ask them together, she decided. When you're stronger. A knock at the door interrupted them. Arya, carrying Corvus's evening medication. Selene observed their daughter attentively caring for him, skillfully fluffing his pillows and inspecting his bandage, just as she had been instructed. Arya, Corvus called out as she prepared to exit. Could you and Gareth spare a few moments? We have a matter we'd like to talk about. Selene gripped his hand as they presented the idea of adoption to the children. The delight on their faces and their eager acceptance were all the confirmation they required. That evening, as she wrote in her journal, Selene pondered how love could evolve. Peregrine's ring now held new vows. Arundel's flowers would bloom in the name of their future ranch, and their children would bear both their legacy and their future within their very names. A family uniting the past and the future, strengthened by the trials they had endured. Spring blossomed with an abundance of wildflowers and wedding plans. The morning glory vines that Arya had planted around the porch columns were just starting to emerge, promising summer blooms for their newly named ranch. The entire community had welcomed the impending celebration, viewing it as a beacon of hope. Following the hardships of winter, Selene remained still as Mrs. Ironson adjusted her wedding dress, her mother's gown, meticulously altered to suit both her form and the current fashion. Arya watched the process with sparkling eyes, her own new dress spread out on the bed. Something borrowed, Mrs. Ironson remarked, securing a delicate lace collar. This belonged to my grandmother, brought all the way from Boston. And something blue, Arya contributed, presenting a sapphire brooch. Corvus had it crafted to match his eyes, she beamed. He asked me to tell you it's also something new. Selena lightly touched the jewel. And something old, a gruff voice echoed from the doorway. Reverend Rowans, who had united Selene and Peregrine all those years ago, stood leaning on his cane, though I imagine I'm not quite what the tradition envisaged. The aged minister had insisted on conducting the ceremony, despite his declining health. Married you to your first love, he'd said to Selene. It seems fitting that I should marry you to your second. The good Lord knows the heart can expand to hold more love. The days preceding the wedding transformed their homestead. The barn, once a sanctuary from peril, became a floral-filled reception hall. The Bramsons, now settled in their reconstructed cabin, assisted in hanging lanterns from the rafters. Gareth demonstrated his prowess in overseeing the decorating teams, his innate organizational abilities shining through. Corvus, meanwhile, appeared to have his own surprises planned. Enigmatic packages arrived from Denver, and he spent countless hours in private discussions with Arya, who safeguarded their secrets with diplomatic finesse. You'll see, Mama, was all she would reveal, her eyes gleaming with shared secrecy. The day of the wedding broke clear and sunny. Selene awoke to discover a present on her pillow, a framed family portrait, the first they had taken together. Corvus and Selene sat at the heart of the gathering, with the children standing proudly behind them, all their faces radiant with joy. The frame of their portrait was adorned with carvings of morning glories and wheat tocks, symbolizing the merging of their histories into a shared future. A note in Corvus's handwriting declared, Our first official family portrait, though you've been in my heart far longer. Today we make it official, my love. The ceremony itself was a revelation to Selene, simple yet deeply meaningful, intimate yet shared with their entire community. Arya and Gareth stood beside them, not just as children, but as essential parts of the family being united. When the time for vows arrived, Corvus took everyone by surprise by addressing the children first. "Before I make my promises to your mother," he began, his voice resonating through the assembled crowd, "I have promises for you." He presented 2 small boxes. Inside are pocket watches, similar to the one that led me to your door on that stormy night. They bear your chosen names, honoring both your fathers. Arya carefully opened hers, her fingers trembling as she read aloud. Arya Colinthar Hartson, beloved daughter. Gareth's voice joined hers. Gareth Colinthar Hartson, cherished son. Corvus's eyes shone brightly as he continued. I promise to hold you both in my heart as my own, to honor the memory of the man who brought you into this world, and to strive every day to be worthy of the title you've given me, Papa. Not a single eye in the gathering remained dry as Corvus then turned to Selene, taking her hands in his. And to you, my love, I promise a partnership in all things, to build our Morning Glory Ranch together, to raise our children with love and wisdom, to face whatever storms come our way, with the same courage you showed on that first night when you took in a stranger and changed all our lives forever. Selene's response flowed from her heart, sincere and unscripted. I promise to continue building this beautiful life with you, to weave our family's legacies into something new and wonderful, and to greet each new day with gratitude for the love that brought us together. Reverend Rowan smiled broadly as he pronounced them husband and wife. As Corvus kissed her, Selene heard Arya whisper to Gareth, "Now we're officially Hartsons, too." The celebration that followed was a true community event. Tables overflowed with potluck dishes. Children played among the lantern-lit trees, and even the most reserved ladies found themselves joining in the dancing. As Selene looked around at their transformed barn, at their children dancing with the Bramson kids, and at Corvus's face glowing with joy, she felt the profound rightness of their journey. They had built this happiness together, step by step, choice by choice, love by love. The morning glories might not be in bloom yet, but their promise was evident in every green shoot reaching for the sun. New life, new beginnings, new beauty unfolding each day. A year had passed since then, and Selene was seated in the parlor of the Morning Glory Ranch, jotting down the day's happenings in the leather-bound journal that Corvus had gifted her. Outside the window, morning glories flourished in vivid hues of purple and blue, their tendrils robust and well-established, much like the family they symbolized. Beside her lay the new family Bible, its pages chronicling their united lives, the adoption of the children, their wedding, and now her hand rested on her swelling belly, anticipating the newest Hartson's arrival with the spring. Arya's voice floated in from the yard, steady and assured, as she guided the ranch hands in moving the cattle to the northern pasture. At 15, she had fully embraced her role as Corvus's apprentice, displaying a natural aptitude for ranch management that filled her father with pride. She's inherited both our business acumen, Corvus had remarked recently, observing Arya update the breeding records, and both our love for the land. Gareth, now 12, had discovered his own calling. He had merged Peregrine's woodworking prowess with Corvus's engineering ingenuity. The graceful cradle taking form in his workshop demonstrated how seamlessly those inherited skills merged. Selene smiled, recalling the morning Gareth had presented his design plans, explaining how he had integrated elements from both families. Morning glories adorned the rails. Wheat stalks graced the headboard, all supported by the sturdy craftsmanship Peregrine had taught him to appreciate. The baby should understand their heritage, he declared solemnly. All the pieces that shaped us into who we are. A disturbance in the yard caught Selene's attention. Corvus was returning from the Double headquarters, where Nightgrove's trial had finally reached its conclusion. The children hurried to greet him, and even from afar Selene could sense the positive news in his demeanor. "Guilty on all charges," he declared as she approached. The evidence was overwhelming. "Nightgrove's reign is over." Arya threw her arms around him. "Does this mean the Morning Glory Ranch is secure?" "Secure and thriving," Corvus affirmed, enveloping Selene in their embrace. "The territorial judge awarded us the water rights Nightgrove had attempted to seize. We can now expand the breeding program as we had envisioned." Gareth looked up from the family huddle. "Then we can assist more families like we helped the Bramsons." "That's correct, son." Corvus tousled his hair. "The Morning Glory Ranch will be a place that nurtures more than just cattle. It will cultivate hope." Later that night, after the children had retired to bed, Selene and Corvus sat on the porch swing, gazing at the stars as they began to appear. The evening breeze carried the delicate fragrance of the flowers that had become their emblem. "I came across something today," Corvus said, retrieving a worn envelope from his vest. It was the menacing letter Nightgrove had sent a year ago, buried among the final trial documents. Its words now held no power to instill fear. Selene read it once more, recalling the dread of that time and how it had forged them into something stronger. "We've journeyed so far," she whispered, drawing comfort from her husband's embrace. "Indeed, we have," Corvus replied, his hand gently resting over hers on her swelling belly. "There are moments when I reflect on that fateful night in the wheat field, remembering the bloodshed. I was so close to missing out on this joy." "But God had different intentions," Selene murmured, "for all of us." They sat in peaceful quiet, attuned to the nightly symphony of their ranch. A cow's lowing in the distance, horses stirring in the barn, and an owl's call echoing through the darkness. Every familiar, cherished sound of a life crafted with love. "Today I inscribed something in the Bible," Corvus shared after a while. "I've been wanting to do it for some time." Selene joined him indoors, where he opened the family Bible to a fresh page. There, in his meticulous script, he had written, "May it be known that love constructs bridges over loss. That family is forged by choice as much as by blood, and that hope, like morning glories, blooms anew each day." The Hartson family, descended from the Colinthar and Hartson lines, stands as a testament to God's mercy in granting second chances and new starts. Written this day in thanks for the night, a destitute widow and her children rescued a mortally wounded cowboy, unaware that he would be God's response to their prayers, just as they were the answer to his. Tears clouded Selene's eyes as she read. "It's flawless," she breathed. "Our tale deserves to be documented," Corvus said, enveloping her in his arms. "So our descendants, and theirs, will understand that love can mend any hurt, build any connection, and transform any existence. They should know they are the legacy of people who chose love over dread, hope over hopelessness, and found their happiness by embracing new beginnings." Selene traced the words on the page, then reached up to caress her husband's cheek. Beyond the window, the evening stars gleamed brightly over the Morning Glory Ranch, bestowing blessings upon the home and family that had blossomed from a single act of kindness on a tempestuous Montana night. If this story touched you, give it a like and tell us in the comments. What would you have done if you were in their shoes? Subscribe to Frontier Stories and join us as we continue to tell stories of hope, resilience, and the beautiful, messy truth of Wild West.